So welcome everybody. My name is Alexandre Kesch, and we will today cover the topic of the future of instant and secure payments in Europe. As Europe prepares for the full implementation of the instant payments regulation, one critical tool stands out as a cornerstone of secure, real-time financial transaction, the Legal Entity Identifier. In this episode, we welcome François Masquelier, Chair of EACT, the European Association of Corporate Treasurer, and a leading voice in European Treasury to explore how LEIs can eliminate fraud, streamline payee verification, and future-proof corporate payments infrastructure. So, François, thank you for being with us. Can you introduce yourself and share a bit about your background in the context of corporate treasurers?
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the invitation. So, as you rightly said, so I'm one of the founder 23 years ago and now chair for the second time of EACT, so the Federation of the National Treasury Association. We cover 26 countries, 26 association in 25 countries, sorry, roughly 15,000 members. Representing roughly 7,000 multinational companies, but also mid-cap. So we are, let's say, representing the treasury profession, meaning that companies with a certain size having, let's say, dedicated treasury function within the companies. However, we could have smaller members, I mean smaller companies, SMEs, mid-corp, without a pure dedicated treasury function. And the purpose of the association is to federate the different associations. But one of the main raison d'être of this association is to, let's say, advocate, to represent, to be the voice of the real economy when it comes to regulation, accounting standards, international rules, guidelines, etc., issued by different entities. But of course, mainly from EU when it comes to regulation and for example, LEI we will talk about today, or instant payment, is clearly the kind of topics we are really keen to defend the best interest of our members. Apart from that, I'm also the chair of the Luxembourg Treasury Association, so I've also, let's say, the role of sharing a local association in a quite dynamic and highly dedicated to finance country in Luxembourg, real economy and financial services. So regulation are quite important for us too. And my third role, I'm also treasury advisors, having been for 30 years, corporate head of corporate treasury in the multinational companies. So that's for my background and the role of the association to federate all our members nationally and to go beyond the border, because now with globalization and with the single market, it's important to make sure that we represent a bigger block. If you want to be heard at EU level, you need to represent the European entity. If you are just the German or the French association, it's difficult to be heard at the commission level. So that's the reason why we decided at the time of the euro to federate and then SEPA came, etc. A lot of regulations after the different crises. So I think that it's our main role to protect, defend the best interest of the members. And when it comes to instant payment, LEI verification of pay, it's something that is very close to our heart, because we know that fraud, it's increasing over time. And it's why I'm delighted to come and to talk to you about that today.
Excellent. So we cannot hope for a better speaker on the topic based on your expertise and also on the same spirit that you have than GLEIF in terms of collaboration. GLEIF is also built on collaborations of various countries for meeting the same objectives. So looking back at regulation, as you introduced the topic, and EU, we are now approaching those implementation of instant payment regulation, which has already been in place and is progressing. So from a treasury perspective, what does this regulation mean for businesses across Europe?
Instant payment was quite important for us, and we were, let's say, advocating a lot because now we are really recognized by the EU as a real way to balance, because usually banks, funds, insurance companies are quite vocal. We were not that vocal. And for the last 5 years, we have been coming from a position of reactive to me being proactive. And when instant payment came, we saw that it was a good opportunity because among our members, we have a lot of merchant, and for the merchant could be important. B2B activities, instant payment could be an issue, could be interesting, but it's not a key issue. But for merchant, it's more an issue because we know that our merchant has B2C activities, and the mean of payment, the security around the payment, the cost for the both party. At the end of the day, we know that the end user will pay for the cost, but it's quite important. The security, the speed, and also to give more, let's say, means of payment to our customers. So it's really quite important. Instant payment was an interesting one because we realized that not only for single instant, but also for bulk with use cases, it could be interesting. And it's also quite interesting to note that we were the one who pushed to say, okay, but great, you propose the verification of pay for the instant, but why not extending to all type of payments? And I think we were quite successfully heard, and it was great because he said, why having better security for instant because it's more, let's say, immediate than for wire transfer, given the size, because for wire transfer, cross-border, it could be up to billions. And so I think that it was a good example of where we as a corporate treasurer association bring a lot of weight into the discussion and push to extend to all type of payments. And honestly, I hope that we will extend to other currencies because why not having all the other European currencies, including all the SEPA countries. GLEIF are based in Switzerland. Why not having the Swiss franc, Norwegian krona, and other, let's say, side currencies included? I think that we at EU level have a role of, let's say, maybe giving the standards. If you think about IBAN is now used by other countries outside EU. Why not doing the same, extending to SEPA zone, the 31 countries, and maybe go beyond? So that's one of the objectives. So to answer your question, yes, extremely important for some of our members, less for B2B activities, but still. And it was an opportunity to open doors to use LEI for other things and to verify the pays, because for big corporates, it's in the B2B business, it's more important, and you have frauds for millions. So it's not just the instant, it's also to make sure that your cross-border will be made, secured, and arrive to the right beneficiaries.
Excellent. So this really goes into the second question about fraud detection, actually. So clearly, fraud continues to be one of the biggest threats to financial security in general, but to corporates, businesses, and to everybody, be it individual or businesses. So why is beneficiary verification such a pain point today? And how are companies currently coping with close matches, for example? And maybe you can explain what those challenges are.
But first thing, I think that it's clear fraud continues to be a major issue. I like to compare to doping in sports. So these guys are always a fraudster, are always ahead of us. And a sort of paradox with the, let's say, development of technology and very fast development of technology and AI, you have, let's say, a smarter fraudster using the let's say videos, fake news, a lot of different ways to imitate the voice, the image, the talk, the accent of person in personification, where a classic fraud case, and it's coming back in some countries. Like recently, I've heard that in the Netherlands it's very popular at the moment. It started in France, but it has been expanded. Even if we know that there's a risk, still we need to educate our member. And fraud, the most classic fraud, in my view, according to the survey, the discussion with my members across Europe, is the fraud to the IBAN, because it's quite easy. You have an IBAN, try to give a right IBAN, make a transfer on your own over the weekend via your electronic banking system, and you put the name of someone else, the payment will go through because it's a right IBAN. So I think it was normal, and I'm even surprised it has not been done before, to check and to have a match between both, because you have the right IBAN, but you want to be sure that you pay to the right person. If not, it's a nightmare to recoup your money if you can. So fraud is quite important to find, and not only this one, but different type of fraud. And of course, we in Treasury are extremely exposed because we are, let's say, manipulating, managing, and processing a lot of payments, receiving a lot of funds So it's quite key for us because really the cash is king, as people say, but it's really the blood or the oxygen of the company, and it's important to make sure that we preserve that. So we have an increase of fraud. Just the fraud of to the IBAN, I've heard that in Europe, on average, according to some specialists, it seems that the average fraud case, it's 200,000 euro. So imagine that you have one, let's say, fraud case every 5 years. So it's a risk of 40,000 per year. So we deserve to have the tools or the mechanics to do that. In the past, before that, we were forced to have our own system, solution like Transparency, ID, some others. We can use a Preval of Swift, although it's not maybe perfect, but to try to do that. But now it will be imposed to all the bank and all the banks without any exception, including the private bank, etc. They are maybe not already, but they should be. And so I guess that it will be a game changer. And the fact that we've extended to all type of payment and tomorrow maybe to all type of currencies within Europe and maybe beyond, will be great because we will protect the member. So it's quite important to verify because we've seen in the past that you can imitate the name. It's very close, but it's not exactly the same name. The fraudsters are very smart, and we should pay attention to that. Or even the email addresses. It's so easy to have an apparently, let's say, a correct email address, but it's not exactly perfect. So we, as corporate association and some banks also, we try to educate our member to prevent fraud. And the last part of your question, are companies currently coping with the close match error? I realized that I made payments the other day on my own. I realized I'm on my own electronic banking system that as soon as you have a small chain, the bank say, okay, you have a problem, you have not a matching or a close match, but not a perfect match. And so you need to clean your database. And I think that a lot of our members will be forced to clean the database upstream if there's some system to do that with their procurement solution or add-on on their system, ERP or treasury management system, or they will have to review the different suppliers. But one of my members told me the other day, yes, I will ask to have some copy of RIPs and ask twice a year to get a confirmation of their bank account. But we know that confirmation of bank accounts are not perfect. Just to give you an anecdote on my own case, I was working for a large multinational company, French one, and then they say, for procurement, for being paid, you need to send the confirmation of your bank account. I send my RIB, relevé d'identité bancaire, and then say, no, it's not enough. You need to get a certificate from your bank that it's really your account and confirmed by your bank, Banque de Luxembourg in this case. I said to my bank, could you please prepare an original sign confirming that I'm okay? I received the original. I said to the company, okay, where shall I send my original to confirm to your procurement it's my bank account confirmed by Banque de Luxembourg? And they say, okay, you can just scan it and send it by mail. So just to explain to you that sometimes you impose some system, but it's so easy to circumvent and to fraud. And I could have been, say, claiming and pretending that I have a confirmation from the bank. You know that the scan or a mail, it's not sufficient proof. So just to say that it's extremely difficult. So if we cannot push to the bank this control, and in a very short period of time, the 10 seconds for the instant, it's a challenge. But all in, when it will work with all the banks, with all the stakeholders ready, including the IT vendors, ERP providers, I think that it will be a real revolution. And just to give you also another example of the past, and we wanted to diverge from that direction. If Yen was not really a success in the US with instant payment, is because we had a lot of fraud cases. And so we said, okay, if we don't have that at inception, the risk it's not to be successful instant payment. And then it will not be because the idea of instant payment was to have something to compensate or to compete with the US credit card domination and to have other alternative way of paying. So if we want to be successful and to develop instant payment, it should be secured, safe. And we wanted to avoid what, at the moment in time, Commission proposed, to delay the IBAN name check. And so, okay, let's start with the instant, but in 1 or 2 years, we will have a sort of a transition period, if you want. And we said, no, it should be from the first day, the 9th of October 2025, enforce the regulation and push all the banks to be ready to do that. And also another anecdote, I was surprised. Less than a year ago, I was discussing with a Swiss wealth management bank based in Luxembourg, and the guy said, "What? Our customers that will not use instant payment. We don't care about that." I say, okay, you should care, or you must care about this instant payment, because instant payment will be imposed to any single bank in Europe. So it's quite important. And again, the close match, I think it's good. We are in a transition period. We are cleaning the database. If you have not done that upfront, you are cleaning your database, and it's a normal exercise just to make sure that you have a. And I realize that the close match could be quite tricky, because I made payment to a VIT Luxembourg department for years, or to some well-known institution, and then the bank asks you to confirm that it's really the institution you mean, or this insurance company, because the name was in English, or the form of company was a bit different. So it's a tricky and heavy exercise, but when we would have cleaned that and have the full system in place with all the banks and all the stakeholder, it will be perfect. And then we could extend to and we will see that instant payment will be a success, I'm convinced. But for being a success, we need to make sure that we minimize as much as possible, ideally at zero, the fraud cases.
And the role of LEI in that would be to fine-tune that verification and ensure that you're talking about the right entity, right, and not someone else of the same name.
Yeah, if you want to talk about the role of LEI, so I said to my member, because some of our members in Italy, in the Netherlands, claimed that the national system was working quite well for, let's say, national payments, because of the VAT, because of the tax ID, etc. VAT, I don't think it's a good one, because for legal entity I'm talking, because not all are subject to VAT. So you have some companies having no VAT. Having a tax reference, I have my tax reference as an individual, I have a tax reference as a company in Luxembourg, we could use it, it will work. But we are talking about a single market, so the idea is when I'm traveling, I'm go to Finland, I would like to buy something in Helsinki to a Kidam in the road, or I don't know, on the flea market, and the guy would like to be paid, so we make an instant payment. The guy will want to make sure that he receives the money, and especially with the restriction, because you have credit card but with limit, you have also the limits in payment cash in Europe, depending on the country. So I think that instant payment could be, in some circumstances, a good way to pay and to have an immediate guarantee that the payment will be received by your counterparty and that you pay to the right counterparty. So really, it's quite important to have an instrument for that. And when we thought about LEI, I say, why not? And I was really defending LEIs. Okay, if you have a better solution, please tell me. But so far, it's the best solution I found, because of your structure and because of the fact that we corporates, a large one, were already using LEI for EMIR reporting, among other things. So I think that LEI is in use for other large multinational companies, even if they push the reporting to their bank, so they need an LEI. So we are used to that. Why not using LEI? Because it has a cost for us, and also an admin cost to adapt into our system, to use it for a second purpose and maybe for other purposes. For example, KYC. I will find normal that a LEI should be also part of KYC to identify the counterparty. So any single element, without, let's say, jumping into the red tape and the over-regulation, but any element that could better secure your identity, your KYC, your AML, your payments, and the reporting related to your exchange with bank, like in EMIR, should be welcome. It's a bit painful for our members, because you have the technicalities. It's burdensome, it consumes some resources, but when it works, it's automated, it works perfectly. And today, I don't hear a lot of complaint about EMIR reporting.
You will be happy to hear that's one of the objectives of GLEIF, is to ensure that the LEI is not only used for mandates but also for other purposes, and multiply the purposes to reduce that pain in a way in multiple use cases. And that brings me to cross-border payments, actually. So LEI has been identified in FATF Recommendation 16 now as a good standard for identification of beneficiary and ordering customer or creditor and debtor in cross-border payments as part of the Recommendation 16. So to your point on national identity system are limited to their national usage, and LEI can bring value for cross-border. How do you see LEI being helpful, I would say, for outside EU cross-border payments as well?
Even outside. So, but if we first take the Europe, the 27, as we say, nationally in some country it works, in some country it was not in place, and still we have a problem because we need if we need a tax reference, we need a tax for individual and for legal entity. Being a treasurer, corporate treasury association, we are more talking about the institution and the legal entities. However, our merchant could be dealing with individuals, so it could be quite interesting. But being a single market, and you know that it's one of the objective of the new commissioner or head of commission, president of the commission, van der Leyen, and the second commission, van der Leyen. So it's really to open to have a, let's say, a capital market union, to have a single market, SIU. The idea is to increase the competitiveness within Europe, to make sure that we are on the same level playing field, and that vis-a-vis the external world, we are not in with competitive disadvantages compared to Switzerland, Norway, US, Asia. And it's also the reason for having, let's say, tried to, it's a famous report, Letta and Draghi, to reduce the red tape. We are far from that because we are extremely orthodox in Europe. But the difficulties we are facing with the fragmentation of state and this ambition, which is quite ambitious, to have one single currency and to have, for example, the Romanian will soon join Euro, and to extend to one single market, I think it's great. Okay, it's just a step. But so if we go there, as for my comparison with the IBAN, maybe the standard could be used by other countries surrounding Europe. I'm thinking about the non-EU, but the SEPA ones, or the non-SEPA ones, even if they have different currencies, where we could imagine that Turkey, Israel, UK, some other country will use it. So I think it could be extended and then become a real, let's say, standard for this part of the world. I don't know if it will be adopted by other countries, but let's see, at least for our territories, it will work. So I do believe it's quite important because the cross-border payment were really causing problem. If you want to talk about the cross-border payment with a different correspondent when you pay in different currencies, believe me, before the emergence of fintech, a couple of years ago, 6-7 years ago, we were talking about improvement of cross-border payment. It was so painful. And suddenly, because of this, let's say, emergence of fintech, suddenly we saw, and neobanks, we saw that Swift revamped the system with Swift GPI. And so it's all possible to track your payment and to make sure that your payment, even if it's a foreign currency or certain foreign currencies, will be paid to the right supplier, and you can track your payment. In the past, it was difficult to guarantee the value date for the payment. It was difficult to track your payment. It was difficult to know who will pay the fees. Even if you say, okay, mine, you are not sure that the amount received by your counterparty will be at 100% what you were, let's say, aiming to pay. So it's all this element that makes the things a bit different. And to come to your point, yeah, I keep thinking that for cross-border, we in Europe could, let's say, lead and orchestrate what could be the future. And why not using LEI for other purposes? Because I think that LEI is an international standard, like the ISO. And, okay, it's a very long alphanumeric, let's say, number of reference, but it's also because of the potential of users you are targeting. And for me, unless you prove that you have a better, let's say, reference, I think it's a good one. Again, we already use it, so why not having more uses of this LEI at corporate level at least, and try to better secure our processes beyond the payment, of course. I mentioned EMIR, but KYCs, etc. Or trade finance.
Absolutely. Trade finance is also one of our objective in terms of supply chain management and trade finance as well, working with the ICC. So on the topic of implementation and complexity of implementation, It's not only corporates. Obviously, we need to be ready for implementation of standards like the LEI, but also a solution provider like ERP system provider or TMS system provider, and also banks. So, what's your view on readiness and what type of collaboration can exist to ensure that adoption is happening and that it's done efficiently?
No, it's an excellent question, and so we are at EACT in talks with all the stakeholders I mentioned, IT vendors, consultants, banks. So we discuss with everybody, and we have different type of members. We have an initiative called Journey to Treasury with SAP, BNP, PwC, and EACT. So 4 big players and 4 different stakeholders. And what we've noticed, we made recently, we issue our 10th edition of Journey to Treasury, where we talk about innovation, use case, because things are evolving quite fast. And so we try to educate and to inform the market. And recently we talk about LEI, and I got a testimony from GLEIF and from Claire, and thanks for that. Some of the member, and it was funny because it was coming from and I will not name them, a non-European, a Norwegian company, and they were complaining about the fact that banks in general, some were ready, but some are not ready at all. And the same with the ERPs and IT vendors, TMSs, etc. And I said to the guy, okay, great, but we as Corporate Treasury Association, we try to inform our members, we try to educate our member, we try also to educate the other stakeholder and to discuss. But I'm not the bank, I cannot develop the system and invest. I'm not the advisors, the big fours, and I'm not the IT vendor. So we talk and we did, and we tried to facilitate and to make sure that all stakeholders were aligned. And very often we talk as EACT, by the way, with the different stakeholders, ISDA, IMFA, EFAMA, European Issuer, name them, IOSCO, with a lot of common initiative, because very often our goals are common, so we have common views. And so we, being the real economy, we are more neutral. So it's why the civil servant usually like to hear from us, because we don't sell something. So we are quite, we are perceived as really objective and neutral. But we can work together, so we have common views. But of course, we can ask the big players, including the SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft of this world, to be ready. But okay, we can encourage. And to come to your question, what is the level of readiness? I would say that it's extremely difficult to test. You can test the water here and there, but it's difficult to have really echoes. And it's why we have an initiative very soon, because we still try to educate the market and to explain. So we plan to have, together with GLEIF and EACT, a webinar mid-November. And we also prepare a series of couple of questions, a very small questionnaire to measure, to assess what is the level of readiness and what are the problems or the issues encountered by our member when it comes to using this euro payments. How does it work with the close match or no match? Some are complaining that some file could be blocked because of a couple of close match, and so they realize that a big database, they were not prepared. So again, let's be honest, and maybe we were not communicating enough. We try to do our best, but you know that even when you communicate quite well, some members will always complain because they miss the train or they miss information and you don't realize. And so they're a bit surprised because suddenly things happen and some payments could be blocked, or at least you have information popping up on your screen and saying, okay, yeah, we have a closed match, but could you validate that this company is the one you want to pay to? So apparently, according to some of the members, it's not perfect, depending on the size of the bank, depending on the countries, depending on different factors, depending on the IT vendors behind. Of course, the larger ones are better prepared or could react faster. But we still have some issues, and I'm really looking forward to discovering the result of this small survey to try to flavor and to extend. And by the way, we have an annual survey that you at GLEIF know quite well. It's an annual survey we launch usually in end of Jan, February, March, and that we disclosed at our EACT summit. And the idea is to have a prospective views on the next 12 to 24 months, what would be the issue. And we plan to a question on LEI and to measure the degree of readiness, the satisfaction, and maybe to have open question to see, okay, what are still the pain point or the point to be improved. But I can imagine that it could be here and there some not ready at the level they should be. But okay, it's always the same. If you remember the early days of SEPA, SEPA, it's also interesting case, by the way, but it's not perfect at inception. It takes a while to be at full speed and cruise altitude. And the second thing, we have also noticed that for SEPA, a lot of people saw that it could be postponed or you have a transition period like MXMT messages or so. So, yeah, no problem. It will be extended. The two messages will be accepted. At a moment in time, we need, okay, stop, we switch and we stop with the former messages and we start with a new one. We stop with the former system with the new one. And that's really complicated because a lot of members are just pushing because it's not the most exciting thing, but be honest. But it's quite important because payment, it's really the heart of treasury activity. So it must work perfectly. And that's why, and a lot of CFOs, by the way, also it's a problem of internal communication. A lot of CFO, the C-level was not informed because we corporate, and I really encourage and urge my member to inform the top management because suddenly, even if you are a CFO, if you should be aware of finance issue and financial regulation, some were surprised. Oh, come on, or is it possible to have problem with this new regulation, etc. So it's important to inform, and maybe we had a lack of preparation at corporate level. But let's be honest, let's also clean in front of our door. And let's be honest, some of us were not good in communicating to the CIO, to the legal department, to the procurement that we could have and face some problem when it will come to the implementation of the instant payment or verification of pay for all your payments.
So progressive implementation and then recurring, making it better progressively as you implement, right? That's the solution ultimately.
Rome was not built in a day, so it takes. It's the difficulties of Europe, and so, but it's great. But I like it because when you see the challenges we are facing in Europe, because we are a huge population, but compared to the states, so it's one country, different states, but it's one country, one language. The foreign countries are, let's say, using the similar standard, etc. So it's easier for us. For us, everything is complicated. It's cultural. It's a language. It's the habits, is the way we work. So it's extremely complicated to get things done. But Euro was for me a revolution because you need to come back to the Roman period or the very old time and centuries ago to find such a region with one single currency. Now we have one single market. It's quite ambitious, but okay, step by step we will come there. It will not be perfect, but again, we should be patient and try to identify where we have, let's say, friction and what we done to
And solve it one by one. Absolutely.
exactly.
And we're getting to the end of our session. Maybe if there was one thing that you would want our listeners to remember from our conversation and from where we need to go with the LEI, but also with those implementation of regulation in Europe, what would it be?
By regulation, we are talking here about payment, but more generally because we are reviewing PSD2. And so I think that for once, Europe tried to be ahead of the others with MiCA, with PSD, with open banking, no, with LEI and verification pay. We are ahead of the others. So we try to continue being ambitious and continue to fix and to define the standards for the future. And for me, LEI should be a standard as well as ISO 20022, as IBAN, as many others. So we have a leading role in Europe, and we should do that. And when you think about it compared to other regions, sometimes we are behind. I fully agree. But here we could be ahead of the others and ahead of the peloton. And I think that we have a potential to drive and to define the roadmap. And when it comes to LEI and the future, and we were talking about the vLEI, I think that the digital LEI could be also another way. I don't know if you've heard, but there are some projects about the digital signature with different projects in Europe. I think all are coming to the same idea to simplify the processes, to have one single KYC. For me, it's a sort of a holy grail. Would it be possible before the end of my career to have a KYC standardized and generalized? Because today we have different KYCs and it's taking a lot of our energies. And one of my wish would be, okay, we should apply and implement more of the Draghi recommendation and simplification, increase the competitiveness, also pass through this standardization, because all the members are always coming to the point. Let's have more standards, because the more system you use, the most different, let's say, services, way of communicating, etc., the more complicated it will be to get access to all the information. And data is key today. And we are in a real-time everything. And for the real-time everything, you need, like for the instant, to make sure that the payment is done over no risk, and you can, let's say, free some time to dedicate our resources and our brains to more added value tasks. That's really the thing. And for the future, I do believe that, I hope that LEI will be a world standard one day. That's one of my expectations personally. And vLEI could also bring us in another dimension and help with this idea of having a sort of digital entity and then individual wallet where you have your own, let's say, ID that you can make sure that we are easily identified when it comes to transaction between individual person cross-border, because that's always the most typical thing. The cross-border, we should be equal to German, or German and French exchange should be at the same level. And sometimes it's complicated because, of course, we had the different hurdles, but a lot of expectation and thanks to GLEIF. And I also want to thank the GLEIF for the cooperation with the EACT, because by joining our force, we can be better. So together we stand, and I think it's important to be thought leaders, and it's what we try to do. So really, thank you to GLEIF and to you member for your support.
Well, thank you to you for your support. I think it's a good conclusion. Collaboration is key.